hospice in general is for people to help them through the problems that they have with end of life. And when families, patients face end of life issues, hospice rather is a coach to help them get through that, whether that is financially, spiritually, emotionally, physically, and it is kind of an interdisciplinary approach, and that's kind of nothing but a fancy word for multiple people all making sure that the goals of the patient and the family are met, and we kind of help coordinate all the efforts so that the patient and the family is actually most comfortable and can die in a setting of their choice, whether that is at home, nursing home, assisted living, personal care home, or sometimes in an inpatient hospice facility, but basically in a dignified and comfortable way.
Okay, who decides who needs hospice and at what stage?
Well, families can refer themselves when they feel that they are ready to do something to help them with end-of-life issues. It always requires a doctor's order eventually.
No.
So when a family calls about it and the patient is eligible for hospice care, because as you know, you're the expert in Alzheimer's, but Alzheimer's is a very lengthy disease, and there's all kinds of stages, and for an patient to come on hospice who has Alzheimer's disease, there are certain criteria that they have to meet, and what they are is when a patient is losing the ability to speak, and in their average day they really don't speak more than 5 or 6 words, and they can say them thousands of times over, like sometimes they get on a repetition, like I want to go home, or you know, leave me alone, or you know, they can say these, but the actual formation of words is restricted to, in the average day, about 5 or 6 words. They're usually incontinent of bowel bladder. They have problems with bathing. They have problems with dressing. They may even put their underwear on the outside. They just forget. So there's these steps, and when they get to a point in the Alzheimer's disease where they also forget how to talk, then it is time where you may be eligible for hospice care at this point, and after that they forget how to walk, and then they forget how to swallow, and it gets worse and worse. But it's really in that very final phase where Medicare and Medicaid and most private insurances pay for hospice care at 100%. So it's really an entitlement that families can benefit from once they get to that part of their disease process, and it helps families too. It's not just for patients. It's
so
for
you also work with the families after the patient has passed on.
Definitely.
Right. We have a bereavement team, and the family is eligible for 13 months of bereavement care after the patient has died. And this is, most families are really grateful for this kind of attention to them. We have specific bereavement coordinators who work with the families.
And how do they operate?
Well, now,
bereavement coordinator.
Yeah, and I'm not a bereavement coordinator, I'm a chaplain, so I work with the patient and the family until the patient dies, and then bereavement takes over. But bereavement often comes in a little before the patient dies and gets to know the family, so they feel comfortable together. It's emotional, spiritual support. Our bereavement counselors, many of them function as chaplains too. They have the same credentials, so to speak.
There's also a mailing campaign, you know. I mean, if a family lives here, or the patient lives here, but the family may be living in Oregon or something, I mean, would be nice to go and visit them during apple season, but I don't think our bosses are going to let us go and visit with the families. But we have a whole campaign of appropriate mailings at certain times in their grief process. So I think they are geared to, in the beginning, into helpful hints. What do you need to do financially, and how do you actually contact Social Security? You know, simple little things. Or I have life insurance, but how does it start? You know, what do I need to send in order to let them know that my spouse has died, or things. So from very hands-on
So they
help.
just take over what you can no longer do because you're too torn up, or
Well,
so
they
kinda
help
just-
guide you through it and say, you know, if you can't sleep, or if you're miserable, or, you know, in the first 2 weeks or so after somebody has died, you know, there's all this busyness.
Right.
You know, people come by to see you, and then, booms, all of a sudden,
You're all-
everybody's going back to work, and you're all alone. And many times in the elderly, you know, it may be that the patient that died was the driver. You know, and the spouse may have a driver's license, but actually may not have driven their car for maybe 5, 6, 7, 10, 20 years, and they don't remember, or are scared. I mean, you know, let's
Teach them how to drive.
well, we do have some volunteers who will help them in a parking lot.
So you like do windows and dishes and everything.
We do have volunteers who will help them, teach them how to pay the bills, because sometimes
Or write checks, or I have a lady just last week that did not know how to put gas in her car, and when her husband was in a nursing home, and I said, well, how are you getting here? And she'd go to the gas station and wait for somebody else to come up, and she'd say, I'll give you $5 if you put gas in my car. Well, you know, you can't do this forever, so you'd be amazed at the different kinds of things we coach people through.
That's wonderful.
Sounds great to have that kind of service. When do you know when to step into it? I mean,
Well, I
being a
step into
chaplain
it from the beginning. As soon as a person comes on service, I go out and visit them and contact the family. Oftentimes, the patient is unable to give me a lot of information about their faith background or their spiritual path, whatever they're on, especially Alzheimer's patients.
Right. But the family
is very able to say, oh, mother was a lifelong Baptist, and she did this and that, and it was very important to her, and then I know how to approach the patient appropriately, so whatever I do with them is comforting to them.
Okay. So you really don't, when you come in when they're like in their last stages, and
well, you know, we have
pretty
people
much.
that come on
Because Alzheimer's being such a long-term disease, and you know.
Well, though, but we have people that come on service and are with us a year later, and they're still appropriate, and they're still declining, but they're still with us. Then we have people that come on service and they die, I mean, literally within hours of coming on service. So there's no way to tell. The longer that people are on service with them, the more attached I get to them, and the harder it is for everybody on the team. But
Yeah, I know how
that's
that
what
can
we
be,
do.
because I had a lady that she didn't have Alzheimer's, but she did have ALS, and to see her to the end was an amazing process with her family and all.
well,
It was-
those families and the patients, they become your own family.
Yeah.
You know, you get
'Cause
so attached.
Yes, I mean, to see her and her family, I was with them about 6 months, and I became so attached to her. And this, you know, it's a hard thing to see, you know.
is,
so
but it's
you guys have some fantastic story of the hardest one you ever been to.
Well, when I first started, I've been in hospice about a little over 20 years.
Oh, so you've seen some things.
I've seen some things, and we always pride ourselves in that we go wherever the patient lives. And in one of my earlier days in hospice, when I'm now basically mostly in the office, but at the time I was a field nurse, and I of course had the address, and I drove back and forth and back and forth. I couldn't find it. because it was a lot where there was these cars that are towed off to a junkyard. Well, that was the address. So I thought we had it wrong, and I looked back and forth, and I finally asked the man in the office at the towing company where the junkyard was, and he said, "Oh yeah, he lives way in the back." And actually the patient was a homeless man, and he was allowed to live in the back of a station wagon.
Oh, dear.
And he had a little inflatable camping mattress on the back of his, and so, you know, as chunky as I am, crawling on my knees, getting in the back of the car to help take care of him. And of course, no running water,
Right.
no electricity. But that is where he chose to live. And, you know, we made all kinds of attempts to see I could get him into a nursing home, and I don't know, that was way too structured for him. That's not how he lived his life, and he wasn't going to do it at the end of life.
Oh, okay. Well, we gonna have anything else to say? We're gonna just wrap this up a little bit, going to commercial.
Okay, I have a question for you.
Sure.
You mentioned that you are a chaplain. Is hospice also for people who are not Christian?
Oh, definitely. In fact, I think that's why we call ourselves spiritual care coordinators, because the word chaplain does have sort of a Christian connotation, and we are here for everybody, for all faiths, no faith. I run into, of course, here in Georgia, I run into a lot of Baptists, but we have patients from every particular faith background, and people who say, you know, I've never really been to church, or I went to church as a child, but I've fallen away from it. But everybody, they may not have a church, but everybody is on some sort of spiritual path. Everybody questions, why am I here? Where am I going? What is this all about? And that's what I address. That's what I talk to people about. And even people that can't talk, people with Alzheimer's disease, I am a presence. I touch, talk gently, play music, pray, whatever it is that I think might be comforting to them, and then to their family also.
Okay. Well, I would like for you to give your address. Want to give your address and phone number out?
Okay. Margot?
We are with Sarah Care Hospice, and you can reach us at 770-698-8785. And if you have any questions about hospice and do you qualify, call me. We serve all of Atlanta, the metropolitan counties, all the way, well, I always tell them all the way from Covington to Rome, Georgia, and as far north as almost Gainesville to Jonesboro. So we cover a very large territory, and we have a couple of offices. So if you're on the West Georgia side, Carrollton and Cedartown, you're covered by our Rome office, and if you're in Atlanta, our office is actually very close to your studio. We're right here off of 285 in the Chambly-Dunwoody area.
Thank you,
Great,
ladies,
thank
for
you.
coming. We'll be right back with Miss Hazel Oates and Miss Greta Tebow. We're talking about how caregivers at home.
Take one step at a time.